young people here, it really shows that there's a deep desire to understand the roots of the problem. And I would suggest just one very simple thing. Before you ask questions about the conflict, we should do well to figure out why do people pick up the gun in a democracy when they have the right to elect and dismiss representatives. Why is it? Maybe violence is politics of the last resort. We'll have to figure this out. But the asking of questions is what makes a society alive. This is what makes for solidarity. You know, solidarity is a concept that has been not used in political debate of the present or even of the recent past. But my generation was brought up in this, with notions of solidarity that if somebody is killed, it hurts you because they are a fellow citizen, he or she is a fellow citizen. And your short introduction to, and what you feel deeply, obviously Shah Faisal feels very deeply about the issue, reminded me of a poem which again we grow up with. The death of each man diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind, so ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for you and me. May I now ask Mr. Murad, no, after. Murad sir, agar aap kuch comment karna chahiye?
I think today is a day when we might think, I think we could talk about framing it as democracy. Dira did it, and Shah Faisal has really given us an account of what is happening in Kashmir. What is it that a Kashmiri today lives through, and what are the political spaces that exist over there. I would like to focus on that how Kashmir has become a part of the larger narrative of framing Indian nationalism in a certain way. And I'll start with this, that we are not talking of nation as a nation of people, but we are talking of the land. We are talking of Kashmir, not about Kashmiris. And I think that's the fundamental difference of this kind of nation that is being talked about. I remember when the nuclear bombs were exploded, at that time, and even later, there have been social media messages going around which says, even if there 3/4 of the Indian people get killed in a nuclear war, it's okay, because we will be victorious, and it does not matter if we lay down our lives for this land, the radioactive land. Now, this is again that nationalism is being framed in terms of blood and land, not in terms of the people. And I think this is the fundamental issue. Is the nationalism for the people, or is it for an idea of a so-called land, which belongs to a certain set of people, which excludes a certain set of people, and exclusionary nationalism built on what used to be called blood and race nationalism. And I think that's the challenge, which makes Kashmir the pawn of this narrative. That Kashmir, what is happening today, is not because there is any desire or belief that this will solve the problem of Kashmir. It is to rouse a certain kind of exclusionary nationalism, which can then be used to knit a certain narrative together, which is what we are seeing today. And I think it's necessary for us to confront that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, guys, we'll keep the applause for later. Shah Faisal, would you like to respond to Prabhu?
I totally agree that the kind of exclusionary nationalism which has been in vogue in the country for the last 4 to 5 years. If you look at the graph of violence, it may sound very coincidental, but the fact is that the escalation in the violence has happened in the last 5 years, fundamentally. And you could blame it on coming together up to political ideologies of opposed polarities. You could also blame it on the kind of muscular and the militarized narrative which became popular in the rest of the country. And I have absolutely no doubts that whatever has happened in the last 5 years in Kashmir, it definitely definitely those people have to share the blame who have been trying to promote a certain brand of nationalism in the country. And those echoes, that echo definitely is in Srinagar at this time. What has been happening in the rest of the country, the lynch mob nationalism, the TV room nationalism, the ink and the scholar nationalism, the nationalism of denying the political space and the democratic space to intellectual class, the de-intellectualization of the public discourse in India, the decline of the intelligentsia and the kind of narrative which we have seen around science here, all those factors have together worked in putting fire to Kashmir. Ma'am, I totally agree with the professor, yeah.
Seema, would you like to intervene at this?
Quick intervention because I actually want to listen to Faisal more. But I just want to say a little bit about the media because he's that was one of his last points initially. And you can see that play out when we over here get into this level of nationalism as the media, of macho nationalism where we wage war and we distort news. I think Kashmir has faced the brunt of it. We've all faced it. The entire country probably has faced it, but Kashmir has faced the brunt. And you can see the play. When the stone pelting started in Kashmir, immediately the Indian media came out with the official thing that stone pelters, it's all Pakistanis. We went into Kashmir and you had initial stages, everybody coming out and saying that this was just a cry of protest. And I remember a big meeting where all the young people came out and we had, politicians and we had film personalities like Saeed Mirza and others. And these guys kept coming and said, I'm a stone pelter, I'm a stone pelter, I'm a stone pelter. Meaning what they were trying to say is that we are indigenous people, don't always marry us to Pakistan. So there was that anger. Then when the floods came, the way the youth of Kashmir worked day and night at risk to their lives, and in places along with the army, which the army also acknowledged, that yes, it is because of the young people that we were able to rescue people in the villages who were trapped, who were facing certain death. And what did we report here? Day and night, only the army rescuing. The stories of heroic valor was not even touched upon, created tensions. People were upset, they felt that they're not being recognized, they feel that again you're pushing them with, their back to the wall. So this has been a constant refrain, and I was discussing a little earlier that 5 years ago, when we went in there and thought the situation was terrible, I mean, it's a far cry. It seems normal compared to what we are facing today with the media. I'm talking about the media. About the kind of channels we have come, the warmongering propaganda, the kind of people who call themselves journalists and are not journalists. They're not news channels, they are propaganda channels. And we have been trying to work with the journalist bodies to finally, at least from within us, define what is news, what is accountability, what is transparency, what is responsibility. And then say that that is a news channel or not a news channel. Any fool opens up a channel regardless of where he comes from just because he has the money and says it's news. This is not news. Journalism is the fourth pillar of democracy. You destroy journalism, you destroy the other institutions of democracy. And that's what we are seeing.
When it comes to understanding Indian democracy in Kashmir, the point is what are those institutions, what are those symbols of democracy which a Kashmiri youngster usually relates to. So fundamentally, as we talked about earlier also, that when it comes to first symbol would be, or the first representation would be the electoral democracy. So Kashmiris have been extremely suspect of the brand of electoral democracy and the representative democracy that has been in work in the state for the last 70 years. So they do not really, it doesn't really give much confidence to a Kashmiri. Then would come to the other institutions when it comes to certain federal institutions. Let's talk with media. Media would be something where media is a representative of democracy. It's something which is a bulwark of democracy. But when Indian media or the national media or the TV rooms, when yesterday this unfortunate, horrible incident happened in Kashmir, It was firstly the TV roams which started the cries for revenge. Revenge against Kashmiris, revenge against anybody who has a certain kind of identity. So then revenge turned into warmongering, as you said it rightly. And this warmongering has been happening for many years now. We have been looking at surgical strikes, and if you look at the narrative in Kashmir and ask people that, what about surgical strikes? You will understand a totally different story around surgical strikes. Does it matter or not? We saw demonetization, and how did Indian media kind of portray demonetization was that it was something which crippled the stone pelters and closed their sources of income and improved the law and order situation on the ground. I have been somebody who has been dealing with law and order in Kashmir for the last 10 years. Sir has been here, and we understand the nuances of law and order. It doesn't really work that way. So what the media channels have been essentially doing is that they have been ensuring that there is absolutely no space for reconciliation with the Indian state and the Indian democratic institutions. If the kind of India that Kashmiris get to see on their TV screens, that India doesn't really inspire confidence in anybody.
Thank you.
In my view, is the problem unsolved between India and Pakistan rights its independence. But from 1947, whatever 40 years they sent their people in 47 occupied, till 1975, there was, this kind of thing was not there. Then luckily, Sheikh Abdullah was again heading the state. 75 to 82, it lasted 7 years. When Sheikh Saab passed away, there were elections in 83. Unfortunately, at the outset, let me tell you, my reading of Kashmir is that the mess is entirely due to successive governments in Delhi. Blaming Srinagar is of no use. And when I say successive governments, we began very early. We tried to dilute the terms of accession of Kashmir to India. In 83, a peculiar thing happened. There was an election, assembly election of Kashmir, where National Conference was the Kashmiri dominating party and the Congress party from Delhi. They couldn't arrive at an arrangement. They fought against each other. And the National Conference won. Farooq Abdullah became the Chief Minister. Unfortunately, we have a thin skin. New Delhi did not like it. They thought Kashmiris have shown their thumb to New Delhi. That's not the way to see. It's a federal system. They have elected their own government. By a midnight coup, defections were engineered and the Kashmir government was brought down. Another government was placed. The people of Kashmir, whatever they were before that, on that day, they were totally alienated. The message they got was that any election process which has been done properly, whose probity is not in doubt, if that is not respected, then you are treating Kashmir as a colony, not as a part of the Indian Union. All the problems began after that. As Shah Faisal rightly pointed out, the 87 elections were notorious. Kashmiri felt even another nail in the coffin. And after 87, last 32 years, we are seeing what's happening in Kashmir. Everybody's got a share to blame. The major part of blame is the union government in Delhi, or whichever party. I am not, last 5 years what's happening doesn't even need mention. I don't even talk, it's self-evident. But even the dilution of Article 370 has successfully been done by all the governments. Right from Jawaharlal Nehru's time, Indira Gandhi's time, every government likes to extend its footprint in Kashmir. Whether the Election Commission, Supreme Court, slowly the essence of that accession has been demolished. What is the way forward? In my view, in a humble view, you must first restore that confidence in them. You must tell them, we will abide by the terms of accession. Whatever this word autonomy, there are terms of accession. We have agreed. This you will do, this we will do. We should stick to that from our point of view. Lord, nobody can go out of Kashmir. They are part of the Indian Union. But putting so much army, so much police, it only adds to the alienation. And today's youth think which people don't notice. I am talking 30 years. Most of the youth today is born after that. They don't know the past history. They don't know the glorious days of Sheikh Abdullah and the Union government. We have alienated the population completely and successfully. Now how do you get back? I am very happy that Shah Faisal resigned from his IAS and joined, trying to do his bit to bring sanity in the valley. That I would say the beginning is to start restoring the process, not saying that Article 370 should be abolished and all that. All that doesn't wash. Thank you.
I want your response, Shah, to something. Something I have been feeling. The dominant frame in which the Kashmir issue is posed is that it is a law and order problem or a problem of insurgency. Suppose we were, or the policy makers rather, but policy makers have to respond to civil society mobilization because governments really do not follow the path of justice unless we in civil society mount pressure on them to do so. Suppose we were to see Kashmir as a political problem can be resolved politically through democratic means, what would be your response?
I think fundamentally when we try to frame Kashmir in the nature of a law and order situation or maybe a proxy war or maybe insurgency issue, what happens is that we are actually extricating the history of the conflict from the conflict. And what we are trying to do is that we are asking a generation of Kashmiris to kind of forget the history, the context, the geography, the culture, the memory which has brought us right to this situation. As Mr. Muraka very rightly said, that it's about those historical milestones like 1975, like 83, like 87, like 96, which are very important. And we cannot talk about the conflict while ignoring those important milestones. When it comes to how can we possibly connect history with this? So we have 100,000 killings have happened in the last 70 years. We have custodial disappearances of unknown number. We have an entire civilization, Kashmiri Pandits, who had to abandon their homes and who are living in exile. The new generation doesn't understand the roots that they come from. We have a new phase of militancy happening in Kashmir. And then we tell people, let's forget all this, whatever has happened in the last 70 years. Let's move on, take a package from India of 70,000 crores and forget about it and do some development and tourism and forget whatever has happened in the past and live happily thereafter. We are ignoring that it was none less than the Prime Minister of this country who has given a promise to the people of Jammu and Kashmir that those conditions on which accession was made, those conditions will be respected. I think those conditions need to be respected. Today, when people tell us that we are going to abolish Article 35A, people tell us we are going to abolish Article 370, what are they going to, what are they trying to convey? What kind of relationship do they envisage between the Union of India and the Jammu and Kashmir state in absence of these important articles? I think the kind of ignorance that which we are seeing in the rest of the country when it comes to the constitutional or the federal relationship between the Union of India and the Jammu and Kashmir state, I think that needs to be understood. And these provocations, Article 335A ko hatayenge, Article 370A ko hatayenge, when the body is already injured, you have a hurt, the soul is injured, and then you are adding on insults and provocations to those people. I think it's one of the most, unfortunate things which has been happening, that we are trying to provoke Kashmiris into violence by raising the bogies which absolutely are not even relevant today. Thank you.
Should we respond to it?
I think that if we continue to frame Kashmir as a law and order problem, we have lost the politics of Kashmir, because obviously then the trajectory is more violence, more military, more police. And if you look at the size of the population and the size of armed forces we're putting over there, security forces we're putting over there, this is going nowhere, clearly. So this muscular nationalism by which we crush all dissent and make it to law order, restore law and order, is really the restoration of, shall we say, the graveyard. You get peace, but the peace of the graveyard, and that's not going to happen either. So I think this is the key problem that we face. But the problem cannot be solved by the people of Kashmir. Unfortunately, the problem is the people of India. Unless we win this battle here, we cannot solve the problem that we are facing in Kashmir today. Kashmiris are being held hostage of a toxic nationalism, and that's the problem we both have to fight jointly.
Seema, if you'd like to come in, and then I'll let Shah Faisal have the last words before we open the presentations.
Yeah, just taking on from the last point, I think that we just carried army soldier, I mean, even taking it from that argument, where he's written, given a guideline, that what does a soldier do when the governments run out of options? So if a government, stretches back and says that all the entire option that we have is to mess around with the status of the state with the rest of India, and by threatening to abolish certain statutes which determine that relationship, and we are only going to treat it like a law and order problem, and there is nothing else but a law and order problem, you're creating, I mean, if you do that with any state, forget Kashmir and a sensitive border state, which has so many things being played around with. If you do that with any state today in this country, you have a problem. You did it with in West Bengal, saw it. You had Mamta out on the roads. That's not a border state, that's not Kashmir, that's not dominated by the Muslims, it's not interfered with by Pakistan, but federalism, autonomy, democracy all go hand in hand. You can't mess around with it. In states like Kashmir and the Northeast, which we have seen ourselves in the 80s, the terrible, terrible violence when elections were declared there against the will of the people in Assam moving into Delhi. We've seen the terrible violence, we've seen the insurgency, we've seen how it happens. So if you can't have a border policy and you cannot handle your border states, you will not be able to handle the rest of India and turn India into a developed, vibrant democracy that we all come and make these rah-rah promises with, but which have no meaning.
I would conclude by saying that it will be extremely dangerous to kind of expect that we can replicate a Punjab or a Chhattisgarh or a Manipur experience in Kashmir. Kashmir is not Chhattisgarh, it's not Manipur, it's not Punjab. It's a region where 3 nuclear powers are this time engaged in an international conflict, and it needs to be very sensitively dealt with, number one. Number second, what can possibly be done about the situation immediately there is that I think we need to revive our humanity first. What has happened is that the Kashmir conflict has now become a war between or it is made to be a war or a confrontation between the soldier and the stone cutter, or a cop and the stone cutter, or a cop and the militant. Fundamentally, it's the security forces which are standing in, which are actually, picking up the cross of the politician. It's fundamentally a problem of depoliticization of a space. It's about the politician withdrawing from a certain territory which belongs to him, which is then filled by the soldier and the cop and the counterinsurgent. I wish the politicians of this country take the responsibility and actually fill in the space that belongs to them, and do not push soldiers and the cops and the police people to the borders and to those battle zones which do not belong to them. I wish the politician of this country actually now rises up and stops bloodshed, and the people of this country hold these politicians accountable.